Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
2,500 points of Evan, perhaps. Although I wasn't there yesterday, but you were.
You were there in spirit, sir. You were there in spirit. So yes, we had our first. We were trying out 2,500 points, but as we're getting towards the end of their 2025 year calendar, and definitely saw a lot of community excitement and interest, mixing things up, not just doing the standard 2,000 point singles events. We just did our doubles event as our last GT 2-day event. That was very successful, very popular. So we said, hey, let's try now to toss out a 2,500 point event and see how that would go. And it was a pretty exciting turnout. I mean, that event filled up real quick.
Okay, so we have some exciting results here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit so you guys can see how many more Orcs and Goblins there were near the top. We got Darren and Stuart were also doing well with their Orcs and Goblins as well.
They
I don't
did
know what it
exceptionally
is.
well.
Yeah, about the Orcs at this points level, but it seemed that they really brought it yesterday. And there's also a lot of Warriors of Chaos with Leo and both Eric bringing different
It
kinds
could have
of
been the
Warriors
points
of Chaos.
level. It could have been, October. You never know. That could have been a factor as well.
Yeah, for sure. And when you have a limited sample size, it's always just like interesting and exciting to see what the results are, especially because you have a lot of individual games. A lot of people bring up that, oldworldrankings.com, there's not enough data to have any kind of consistent numbers on anything. That's not exactly true. So from a statistics point of view, maybe, but every single one of those data points is a game that somebody spent 3.5 hours playing and either had fun or did not have fun playing. So all of those results are a big collection of anecdotal values, and we have more of them here today. And we could talk a little about that. Like, for example, how Eric played against Martin in round one and got a 19-1, which is an absolute slaughtering. And
Yeah,
I
that
feel
was
bad for my
brutal.
friend Martin there.
So I think two interesting things for this event before we dive into the winners and go over their list. The first one is, of course, we were playing 2,500 points, so that's the first time we've done that. And again, we're testing this out for the community, collecting feedback, seeing is the community interested in having maybe not all the events, but more of the events above 2,000 points. There seems to be a lot more interest as of that over the last several months, certainly than there was a year ago. And I think part of that is people are more comfortable with the rule set. They've built and painted more of their armies. They're looking for more variety, and there's just new combos and things unlock once you hit a different points threshold. So it's a new puzzle to solve. So I think that was one of the factors too. But then we're still using the match play guide rules from GW as events. The other thing, we did have a rule for the Cathay player that you could only take 2 Sky Lanterns. You were restricted to 2. This is the first time we've actually had any kind of comp rulings for one of our events. I love the Cathay players. I love that they show up to the events, but from our doubles event, the survey and the feedback was very clear. It created a not fun atmosphere for people on the other side of 3 Sky Lanterns, when two of them being characters. So we restricted it to 2 per Cathay player. So with the Cathay players, it was interesting. We gave them the restriction of 2 Sky Lanterns instead of 3, and only one of them may be a character. Now, we actually know out of the 18 players that showed up to this event, that's as many as we could actually fit in this local gaming store that we were hosting at. We did have more players who wanted to show up, but we just didn't have space. At least 5 of them do have a Cathay army, but they decided, most of them, to not bring Cathay at all. Just mix it up, and try something else because they have more than one army. And the one Cathay player who did bring their Cathay army decided to go with no Sky Lanterns and decided to go with no Sentinels. So it was interesting. A lot of the players were actually building their 2,500 point list, preparing to shoot down Sky Lanterns. And then there were none at the event. I'm like, wow, that was unexpected. Though there were a lot of dragons. That is something that was very common.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well,
So why don't we move
yeah, I
forward
was
there,
just gonna
sir?
say, in particular, with the match play guide, the 500 point cap kind of goes away when you go to 2,500, which I personally am starting to really grind against that because I think that the 570 point character who's riding a monster is actually not the end all be all that he used to be, especially with the changes that 1.5 brought, and now trying to even can't comp him even harder and then make the game much more shooting focused. I much prefer the idea that I've got one big scary guy to run away from instead of a lot of things that just shoot me. But yeah, we're going to go into the lists here, so we can talk about Jonathan's first, right?
Yep. So we'll start with Jonathan. Congratulations, sir. He won the event with Orcs and Goblins. Actually, it was a lot more goblins, not a lot of orcs.
Yeah.
Jonathan is one of our local players, really good player, really fun guy, and he loves his Night Goblins. And he brought a whole bunch of them, and in particular, he brought a whole bunch of Goblin artillery as well. It was very effective. So why don't we go through his list and talk?
Yeah, so I've played against Jonathan once before. Just having an absolute ton of war bosses on cave squigs that have random movement. We've got Night Goblins with fanatics. There's 4 units here, so there's 12 fanatics in these units. He is taking short bows, I imagine, just in order to plink shots off at random things or to force engagement. Because I mean, he can march forward and throw fanatics at you, or if you try to hang back, he can at least fire some number of arrows, right? Especially against things like wood elves, that's plenty, if you know what I mean. And then we've got bolt thrower, bolt thrower, bolt thrower, bolt thrower. And then if we scroll down a little bit, there's 2 rock lobbers, 2 doom divers. So there's already 8 war machines in the list. And then if you combine that with, we've got 2 more mangler squigs and some hoppers. You've got a bunch of basically everything in this army either shoots you or is a random mover, right?
Hmm.
That is
Pretty
a
much.
pretty difficult to engage with
Or
army.
releases fanatics. Yeah.
Yeah, or just says fanatics, right? And then you've got a pretty difficult to engage with army on your hands. Where if you're, for example, playing Bretonia, like his round 2 opponent that I was talking to about this, well, if you have a lot of knights, if you move into charge range with your knights, he can march forward with goblins and then just throw fanatics at you in your turn, and they get to you before they can charge them. So if you have like a 17-inch charge range, that's not far enough. The goblins can get you, right?
Yeah, and I think that was the interesting thing that I think when we players were taking 2,000 points, um, the version of the list I actually believe was easier to deal with the type of armies that people were playing. But because so many players were preparing to fight Sky Lanterns, right? They were taking harder things, more durable things. They had very few throwaway chaff units because because versus Sky Lantern, it just obliterates them, right?
Yeah.
Versus that's exactly what you need versus a Night Goblin army like this, a Horde army. You have to just have these units to just chase down those bolt throwers, and it doesn't matter if they die or just sucker out the fanatics. But because people were gearing their meta for the Sky Lanterns, this list actually performed really well because a lot of the players didn't have counters, and they didn't bring counters because they weren't anticipating this.
So who is his round 1 opponent?
Oh, let me look. Give me a minute. I
Okay,
don't have
while
it
you're
on
looking
my
at
list.
that, so he's got an odd knob here with Idol of Mork for the dispel ability. Got a power scroll to get some of your spells off. Ruby ring. So you just have a lot of damage up from the sky. Waaagh magic. I don't think it actually really matters that much because you don't really need Plague of Rust or anything. You just really want Itchy Nuisance and then whatever else
Footagor's pretty
happens.
nice.
Yeah, Footagork is funny. The one time I played Jonathan, I've told the story before. He cast his Footagork, and this was back before the vortexes didn't just infinitely bounce through. And so he cast Footagork, and then it bounced through his own units like 24 inches away to kill his wizard that was casting it. Because it just bounced through like 4 units. It's
That's
great.
the life of a goblin, sir. Sometimes it works for you, sometimes it gets you. So round one, he played Jeremy with his dwarven mountain
Ah,
elves, and the
right, yes.
dwarves shot their best at the oncoming tide, and they killed many night goblins. But they just didn't have enough crossbow bolts and cannons to take them all down.
Yeah, see, shooting isn't really amazing versus this list because you can fire into the war bosses on wyverns or on squigs who are not very many points. So if you fire like 2 or 3 cannons at one squig, you're like, great, that was only like 137 points, right? And then the war machines often don't really do anything to these big bricks of guys, right? And then
Well, the cannons don't, right?
yeah,
Because if they
no,
were
I'm saying even a
bringing
stone thrower
mortars,
doesn't do that much, right?
no, if you hit a stone thrower with the partial hits, you will kill many night goblins. But
Yeah,
again, most people are bringing one stone
yeah.
thrower, right? And when you have 100+ night goblins, one's only going to get you so far. If people were bringing lists that had 2 or 3 stone throwers, that would devastate the night goblins. But people weren't bringing that.
Yeah, and also that the fact that the fanatics you can't shoot at them, you can't you can't really interact with them very much other than putting a unit in their face that either is invulnerable to their damage like ethereal or is essentially like I don't care if it dies. Those are like the 2 options.
Pretty much.
Because you can't really shoot night goblins to death, and the only other option is not to get close to them. And if there's objective play, then you have to get close to them. So
Yeah,
pretty
because they're
difficult
going
to
to
deal
bully
with.
you on the objectives. Yeah, so that's where you really need the best method is because the ethereal is just not reliable unless you're playing vampire counts, and that he didn't face at this event. So it's did you bring those chaff units that are annoying enough or problematic enough that they do have to release the fanatics, and you don't and they're low enough points that it's not going to be an issue to set them right, and yeah.
Yeah, and then Mangler Skigs are again, they're pretty much easy to shoot, but they are very cheap for just being able to chomp an absolute massive amount of damage. If you compare the Mangler Squig to the war boss on a squig, they're almost like the same type of unit. They run around really quick. They go by themselves. They smash into something. You probably do more damage than you lose. And when somebody kills it, they're like, great, that was not very many points. Like the goblins are just so points efficient that in a kill points game, it's like they're gonna kill so much more than they lose a lot of the time.
Generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Mangler Squigs, the big difference is there. They hit so much harder. They probably, for their points value, are probably the hardest hitting thing in the game, or at least top 3 for 95 points. But they just don't have the armor, and they only have the 4 wounds. Versus the Night Goblin on the Cave Squig, the giant Cave Squig hits hard, nowhere near as hard as the Mangler Squig, but he's way more durable because you give him the Lion Armor, the Shield, and then Troll Pants. And then once you have Troll Pants, you get the 3-up armor save, you get that regen. It makes them fairly defensible, actually, for even though it's a goblin.
Yeah, it's funny how the guy starts so cheap that he can buy a decent mount, and then he's still only 137 after spending, what is it, 40 points on Trollhide Trousers? So, like, this guy with no items at all is like 90 points on this mount. That's insane. That's my cat's tail, by the way. Yeah, I do think this army is very difficult to deal with. I very often like to bring things that have ways to deal with this, like having like Mournfang that are just potentially they're going to just survive all the fanatics and they're just going to eat through goblins like crazy, or things that have terror, so you just tear them off the table. This army really doesn't like playing against like necromancy or screaming skull catapults and stuff like that. But again, like if you just don't play those opponents, like round 1 he played dwarves, which is an elite army focused on armor. Great, fanatics are good against that. And then in round 2 he plays against Bretonnian. Great, an elite army focused on armor. They're good against that. And then round 3 he played against Eric's, who's our 3rd place player. His Wolves of the Sea. Great, an elite army focused on armor with some dragons that also are really good to be killed with the fanatics or the catapult.
Sometimes one of the best ways to win is to just show up when everyone thinks one meta threat is going to be the big thing, and then everyone's gearing towards one meta threat, and then you are just bringing something completely different, and people just aren't prepared for you. And sometimes that's a great way to do. That being said, Jonathan's also a very good player. He's been playing this list for a long time. He really knows the ins and outs of it very well. And big congrats, Jonathan, for taking down the event of the day. You did an awesome job.
And just to be clear, this is also a very tuned list to play against Sky Lanterns, even though he didn't play them yesterday. If he had, he's got all of the shooting. He's got all these bow shots, so that as soon as a Lantern's on 1 wound left, let's just throw 90 arrows at it, see what happens.
Yes.
You got Fanatics that are great against the Lantern because it's like you have to get close enough for me to use Fanatics on you. And even if you go behind me, I can still release backwards. And then they just start bouncing around, and maybe they hit the Lantern a second or third time. They can bounce through multiple of them.
It is a good list.
So
it is a very good list.
Yeah. Okay, and then next up we've got Leo. He got 2nd place. I think this is a second time.
Well done, Leo. So he also went undefeated. So we had 2 undefeated players, and Leo was one of them. Jonathan just squeaked out ahead of the first place with a few more battle points at the end of the day.
Yes. So he's got some lore here for his army. I know he's got basically these exiles from the Empire, and they're on the Norscan coast, and they forged a dark pact with a wizard. And these are his, he's regular Warriors of Chaos because he likes to be a little bit more flexible with what units he's bringing. Above 2,000 points, the Chaos Lord shows back up, and you know what? I missed him. He's kind of an adorable little guy. If people are really scared of him, I just think... Personally, I'm trying to put Dragon Slayer Sword in all of my lists, because even if it doesn't do anything at all half the time because the person has no monsters, I just love the idea that I do roll the 6 like I did in the last tournament, and so I'm just trying to put it in everywhere. So we've got the Chaos Lord on Dragon. He took Marka Tzeentch, and the reason why he's doing this is because he wants his whole army to have like a theme. I think he was telling me about this. So Tzeentch does absolutely nothing for the Chaos Lord, but why not? He wants the army to have a theme.
Should magic resist?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, okay, fair enough. Then we got 2 favors of the gods.
That's the one thing benefit it gives you.
Yeah. 2 favors of the gods, and then the regen banner, regen crown. So again, there's no Ogre Blade on this guy, but I think he usually does enough damage anyway.
Especially because he's riding a dragon.
Yes, for sure. We've got a Chaos Lord, and Skull of Catan is interesting as a magic item, and then we've got Spell Familiar for extra spells. Enchanting Aura on the Wizard. Now, I've been championing this the way it's worth 2 in the bin. I don't know, is that a joke? But anyway, Enchanting Aura on the Wizard. I really like the idea that you get the unit, the Strikes Last benefit, because it really helps a unit of guys so much more, in my mind, than just the Dragon guy, who very often will survive to be able to attack back anyway. So the Enchanting Aura on a unit, because he's going to join these Chaos Warriors, I think, right? And so then you've got, anyone who charges in there, they strike last. He's got a decent amount of, initiative 4 attacks back at you, so he gets to go at the very least at the same time with halberd, stuff like that. Yeah, and then MR2 and the -1 to hit with shooting. So he's just got a nice little Death Star of Chaos Warriors with a wizard. Actually, I'm sorry, there's probably 3 wizards in that. He's been running this recently. And with a lot of magic missiles and just a decent amount of things like flying around, stuff like that. I like it.
Yep.
He's got the Marauder Horseman. Incredibly cheap, incredibly useful utility unit. Probably one of the best utility units in the game. Other than maybe the Warhounds. But because of the objectives requiring unit strength 10, I think the Horsemen are possibly coming back on top, because the dogs are really cheap for just throwing in front of people, but the Horsemen actually get to have unit strength 10 with 5 models, which is different. And then flails, you just do a lot of damage. And we got a Warpfire Dragon. So there's 2 dragons. The Warpfire Dragon taking off enemy ward saves helps the Chaos Lord hit above his weight class, even without an Ogre Blade. It doesn't need it. If the Warpfire Dragon just flies next to you and you have no save, then he just goes and wails on you. And he has one spawn.
I don't know that ever came into play this weekend, but he had it there as a threat just in case. I think more often than not, his dragons were just splitting threats, 2 major threats going at different angles of the board. It's hard to deal with, 2 at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, and and if you go, have the whole challenge. I'm going to challenge you. You won't get to do. You beat me in combat thing. Well, what if you just have 2 dragons fight the same unit? Well, now it's fine, right? Or if any of these horsemen go in, because they all have champions. So that's another reason why they're there. Now, it's kind of funny because this army is so small. There's like 1 big infantry brick and then 3 monsters and 2 little chaff units. It's so...
Yeah, pretty much. It was the big brick and then 2 dragons and then support units.
Wow.
Yep, pretty much.
And he did great, because he won all 3 of his games. He just didn't get as many battle points as Jonathan did. But I would have loved to see him play against Jonathan, because I think Jonathan's list will do well into this, but Leo's a great player, so it would have been interesting to see that.
He's a great player, and I can tell you the big thing that advantage Jonathan would have had was the indirect fire if need be, because Leo is a very good player, and he's able to maneuver his units, play very cagey, play very playing the 6-turn game. And I know that was a challenge for his opponent in round 1 with a lot of bow shopti, is that they just weren't able to bring their bows to bear on the dragons because he was using the terrain to his advantage, right? He didn't need to win on turn 2. He was playing 6 turns. He did very well. But an army that had more indirect fire that could pose more threats, and the terrain's not as much of an advantage. I'm curious how that would have played out.
So we've got Eric's list here. He was kind of on the top table until he played Jonathan, where he was defeated in the last round, and so he got pushed to 3rd place. Again, just an RTT, you don't have the number of rounds to play out to see maybe where someone might have ended up when they played some of their other opponents, which is always just interesting to see. But again, the game is about playing the game, and so the opponent you have is the opponent you get, and that's what's interesting about it. So a Chaos Lord. Now this one has more bonuses. We've got the Brazen Collar for the MR2. Favor the Gods for, not risking rolling the stupidity. Mark of Nurgle makes you way more defensive, and an Ogre Blade for damage. So he didn't take regen, but I think that's another thing people need to remember. Even at above 500 points for a character, the Chaos Lord now can't afford an Ogre Blade and the regen items, because the regen items are 40 points and the Ogre Blade's 75. Yeah. So it used to, or I'm sorry, 35 points or whatever. So you used to be able to take
still
both.
At the cap.
So you hit the cap now, so you can't take both.
You're not hitting the cap of the how many points you could spend on the model cap, because that goes above 500 points. As soon as you break 2,500, it goes to 625 or something. But you still have I'm a character, I can only take 100 points in magic item cap.
Yes, exactly.
So that cap is still the barrier you're going to hit.
Okay, and then we also have Galrock. So for 60 points more than the Warpfire Dragon that's a level 1 wizard, you have Galrock, who's a level 4 wizard. Now, Galrock doesn't have 3 saves, and he has to take Dark Magic, which is in some ways a downside, although I think that if you're a very aggressive list, it can be good. It's just that if you're only level 4, it's so easy to roll like 2 assailment spells on Dark Magic and then not get Battle Lust, and you're like, why did I take this lore? But at least with Galrock, you want to be in combat, and I think that the template one, the Breath of Contagion or whatever it's called, is a really fun spell to use, because against like Night Goblins or something, if you charge into them and you get to use a template in close combat, that's hilarious. I love that. So I don't know if that would have ever happened. I'm assuming that his dragon, because he would just died on the first turn against all the shooting, right? That's what you told me.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I know he played Jonathan, and I know I asked him after the event, hey, what happened? How'd it go? the story that, of course, everyone always goes to their biggest happy story or biggest woe. The first turn one, I'm not sure. Yeah, two stone throwers landed on the head of my dragon. Failed 3 damage and 4 damage. And then
Yeah,
there
just
was
a
the
lot of
dragon was
damage.
gone. It's like, ow. Yeah, stone throwers are really, really, really good in base of a dragon, right? Because they're hitting at strength 8. With pretty much any dragon in the game, you're going to wound it on a 2. So if they have a if they fail those ward saves, here comes the pain,
Yeah, and so just to show people, hey, sometimes dragons do die to shooting. Okay, and in
It
fact,
totally
in
happens.
the Cathay world, it definitely happens a bit more. He's got 2 units of berserkers with flails. The berserkers are kind of insanely cheap for what they are because they get to have frenzy. They have movement 5, so they're faster than regular troops. They can still have flails, and they can ambush. So if you have an enemy that has a ton of shooting, you can go, great. I'm not going to walk these guys across the table and get them shot to death. I'll just ambush and force the opponent to shoot, like either turn around and shoot behind themselves, or they
Hmm.
get charged by a bunch of flail guys in the rear, right? So being able to
Yep.
have the ambush as an option is great, and they're only like 12 points each to be able to do this. Or actually, I think
Hmm.
it's like 10 or 11. It's like, where is that in the elf army roster? I would like to know. um, Even
Sorry,
with the
elves.
flail nerf, because the nerf to flails is that they don't have the strength unless they charge. But again, even with that, you can just probably assure that you're going to charge if you're like a skirmishing unit, or ambushing. Then we
Hmm.
have regular marauders. I think these are probably your objective holdy guys. You have the option to ambush if you need to try to like. I mean, if you play Cathay, for example, put them in ambush. Otherwise, you just get shot to death. So you just hide them. Then we have 2 marauder calves with flail. He's got 7-man here, so it's harder to take away the objective capturing. I'm assuming that's probably why they're 7. So the marauder cav get to ambush too. Jesus Christ, so much
He
ambushing.
was playing Wolves of the Sea, so yes,
Wow. You know what?
that's what this army does.
Yeah, if I would love to see those Marauder Tribe Huskarls who are supposed to be able to ambush, but they like missed the word on the rule sheet. But the Huskarls are a very cool vibe as well. And he
They're
does have
they're
more.
really good.
Yeah, it's just you have more because he has more core, probably for the objective points, right? Because if you took Huskarls instead of regular Cav here, they would not be technically allowed to ambush, even though it seems like maybe they were supposed to be because of Friedal's rules. And
Yeah.
they also wouldn't be able to capture objectives because they're not a core unit. All right, and then the rare unit section, we've got Giant Spawns of Chaos, of course, with Nurgle because it just makes them not die. I think that any 6-wound toughness 6 monster is going, please give me a regen save or else I'll die. And that's what these guys have. And then we have Dragonovers. So if you have to, you ambush your entire core slot, and then you just have Dragonovers, Giant Spawns, and Dragons coming at you, and that's it. Everything is either just incredibly cheap or incredibly murderous with high strength. Right? That's pretty
Yep.
bad.
Pretty
That's
much.
pretty scary.
Yes, it is.
All right, and that's it for the army list. Now we're going to show some pictures, but I have to do something to switch over to that.
Got to find the button with the cool pictures.
Here we go. So we've got a picture here. So I imagine that this is this Jonathan's army? No, there's trolls in this. So this is
No, that was
Stewart's army.
Stewart's army.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there were
beautiful
3.
army. Stewart is a very good player and an awesome hobbyist, and he painted up this beautiful Night Goblin army with some trolls and such. And he is playing Michael's Tomb King's army there, also an exceptional hobbyist. Yeah, really good painters.
This is a beautiful looking dude right there. And I love this little scorpion is just waiting to try to fight a mangler squig. I'm sure that was a great game. Love the cast
Oh yeah.
missiles. Great vibe here.
Hmm.
Um, this is I know this is Matt because his purple beastmen
Hmm.
have been I mean it's very
Iconic.
gorgeous purple beastmen
Yeah,
army that I'm always looking at and going, man, why don't I paint my guys that color?
they're really cool. Yeah, and he's playing Martin there with
Yeah,
his
I could
Empire.
tell because he's got the Knights Panther because he's the only other guy in the
Hmm.
universe who plays Knights Panther than me. Um, and some Outriders, good. The Empire army looks a little small, but hey, they're trying.
Well, there's more of it. I just didn't get it all in the photo.
Oh yeah, and here's Nick with his converted Sentinel who has this absolutely enormous mace thing.
It's
I
so
think that's
cool.
great. That's really cool. Just imagine
Well,
swinging
he
that down on
also
top
he
of people.
didn't glue it, the
Oh, so it
chains
just
together. So
dangles.
when he moves it around, it swings. I'm like, ooh, making me nervous that the model is swinging like that.
Yeah, so we didn't cover his list, but he obviously has Miao Ying and he's got a Shigengan over here and a Sentinel. So this is a very close combat and engaging Cathayan
I think
list,
he
it
had 2
seems.
Sentinels and 3 Shingangan Lords. It was a very
Wow.
cool list, but he had no Sky Lanterns. Well, you can afford a lot when you don't take 6 Sky Lanterns,
Yeah, I think it's really about whether you take the Sky Lantern
And didn't
character
have the
or
cannons
Maggie.
either. He didn't have the cannons and he didn't have the sky lanterns. So he had a ton of room for other stuff. And it was a really cool Cathay list to see what he brought to the event.
Yeah, but I do think that even if they're Celestial Dragon Guard and they're very cheap and cost effective, I think that just having I think it's something like 12 Iron Guts with like a Slaughtermaster and a Tyrant in there is just going to absolutely wail on anything it gets in combat with. The trick to playing against the Garrett's kind of ogre list is just to try to not have to fight the Iron Guts at all. Just go away from them. But if you're not flying or fast, that's difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think I only had 4, so that was it. Oh wait, no, hold on. There's one more.
Cool.
We've
Well,
got yeah, we had I think this is a round 2, so Jonathan's playing against Eric's sad Bretonian list, who's so basically, as we can see here, this is what I was talking about. If you have your Night Goblins moved up just a little bit, they can threaten to just fanatic anything that goes anywhere near any of the objectives down the middle of the table, right? And you've got all of these bolt throwers that actually care about line of sight, put them on the hill, right? So like this list really doesn't want to have any kind of leadership test or any kind of panic, but it's pretty difficult to trigger that if you don't have any way to shoot. Because if you were able to shoot like one of those bolt throwers to death, it could panic the other 3, and they're all like leadership 5. So that could be something, right? Or these Night Goblins are in a forest, so they're disrupted, so they have no leadership bonus. But whether or not you can give them to take a terror test or any kind of
but
test,
if you make him take a terror test, if you had something to charge him, people forget all the time they don't get that rank bonus because they're in the forest. Therefore, they don't get the warband bonus to their leadership. Suddenly, that's like a leadership 5 or 6 unit. Make it cause a terror test. Good luck. And there's no re-rolls for that test in that army. Or if you fire catapults at it, or a nice big fiery convocation. Right? There are plenty of ways to.
yeah,
But at this event, people weren't prepared to face this. They were preparing to face something that didn't show up.
yeah. So I very often like to bring my high magic wizard with high elves or wood elves or something, and being able to throw out Tempest just is a half the table is now impossible for you to use Fanatics on. So I would have liked to play against Jonathan, but I think that most of
Very
the lists that
powerful.
are there do not want to play against this.
Yep.
All right.
All right, cool. So we got to the end of the event. That's the recap. Again, congratulations, winners. And Jonathan, awesome to see Orcs and Goblins, or in this case, lots of Night Goblins, win the day. Well done. And we'll catch you all next time for our November event, where we're going to first narrative event. So we'll let you know how that turns out as soon as we get there.
All right, everyone, just stay legendary. And hey, if you want to join us in the Discord, there's a link in their description.
All right. See you then. Bye.